Most people think they're pretty self-aware, pretty rational, pretty informed, but there's a strange problem with that. The people who know the least are often the most confident, and the people who know the most usually become less certain over time. Why? Why does confidence sometimes come before competence? And why can ignorance feel exactly like intelligence from the inside? There's actually a psychological phenomenon behind this. It's called the Kruger Effect. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger made a strange discovery. People who performed poorly in areas like logic, grammar, and humor consistently believed they performed much better than they actually did, not because they were pretending, but because they genuinely couldn't recognize how many mistakes they were making. And that creates a weird paradox. The skills needed to become good at something are often the same skills needed to judge yourself accurately. So if you don't understand a subject deeply enough, you also don't realize how much you're missing. Imagine someone who watches a few videos about investing, psychology, or nutrition. At first, everything suddenly feels simple. The world feels understandable. But usually that feeling comes from standing near the surface, and the surface can create the illusion that you've already figured everything out. When people first start learning something, they experience a dangerous combination: a little knowledge and a lot of confidence, because beginners finally know enough to talk about the topic, but not enough to see how complicated it really is. A beginner investor thinks markets are predictable. An experienced investor knows how much randomness controls outcomes. A beginner in psychology thinks human behavior is easy to explain. Someone who has studied people deeply realizes how contradictory humans actually are. And this is why experts often sound less dramatic. They hesitate more. They say things like, "It depends." They understand uncertainty. Meanwhile, people with shallow understanding often sound completely sure of themselves. And confidence is persuasive, especially online. Think about how often the most confident person in a conversation immediately sounds the most intelligent, even when they barely understand the topic. Confidence creates the feeling of authority, and our brains naturally respond to people who sound certain. Because certainty feels safe. Simple answers feel comforting. But reality is usually much messier than confident people make it seem. The deeper people go into almost any subject, the more complexity they discover. And that complexity slowly destroys the illusion that everything has an easy answer. People who oversimplify complicated topics often sound more convincing than people who speak carefully, which creates a strange illusion. The internet can make confidence look exactly like expertise, and over time, many people stop looking for truth. They start looking for certainty because certainty feels comforting, even when it's false. Social media makes this even stronger. Online, people are rewarded for sounding confident, fast, and emotionally certain, not careful, nuanced, or thoughtful. A person saying, "This issue is complicated," usually gets ignored. A person saying, "Here's the simple truth nobody wants to admit," sounds powerful. And over time, this changes how people think. Many stop trying to understand reality. They start trying to feel intellectually secure. And that can be dangerous. Because sometimes the people most convinced they understand the world are the people least aware of how limited their understanding actually is. The unsettling thing about the Dunning-Kruger effect is that none of us are completely immune to it. Everyone has blind spots. Everyone has areas where they understand less than they think they do. And that's what makes this idea uncomfortable, because self-awareness has limits. Sometimes confidence is just what ignorance feels like from the inside. But there's also something hopeful hidden in this. The moment you begin questioning your certainty, you may actually be getting closer to understanding reality. Because intelligent people are not the people who always feel right. They're usually the people most aware of how much they still don't know. And maybe that's why genuinely intelligent people often appear quieter. Not because they lack opinions, but because they understand how easy it is to be wrong. The Dunning-Kruger effect is uncomfortable because it forces us to confront a possibility we rarely consider. What if some of our strongest beliefs are built on shallow understanding? What if confidence is not proof of intelligence, but sometimes proof that we haven't looked deeply enough? And maybe the real danger isn't ignorance itself. Maybe the real danger is feeling certain while being unaware of your own limitations. Maybe wisdom is not becoming more certain. Maybe it's becoming more comfortable with uncertainty. The more we learn, the more complicated reality starts to look. And maybe the biggest blind spot is believing we've already figured everything out. Because the moment we stop questioning ourselves, we may also stop learning. And perhaps real intelligence begins with a simple realization: there will always be more we don't understand than we do.